The riverfront is packed. String lights sway, music crackles, people laugh a beat too loud. Kids run between tables. Volunteers count cash with careful hands. Then the rhythm stutters. A conversation stops mid-word. A smile drops and never comes back. A small circle opens near the dock offices, like the crowd is making space for something it doesn't want to name. A leash slides taut for the first time. Not pulling, not panicking, just wrong. The dog's ears lock. Breath slows, eyes pinned to the edge of the light. Someone shifts behind tinted windows. A hand hovers over paperwork, and the air turns thin, like the next touch will decide everything. The riverfront didn't have one face. It had moods. In the morning, it was joggers and coffee steam, sun flashing on water like scattered coins. By afternoon, it turned into a working thing. Diesel breath from tugboats, gulls screaming over the fish market, forklifts beeping as they bullied pallets into place. And tonight, it was dressed up. String lights looped between metal poles like a cheap constellation. A community stage had been built from rented scaffolding and optimism. Folding tables overflowed with raffle baskets, bake sale trays, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Harbor Relief Fundraiser, Keep Our Waterfront Strong." Music drifted from a speaker that crackled whenever the bass hit too hard. Children chased each other between booth legs. Adults laughed a little louder than usual, the way people do when they're trying to convince themselves everything's fine. Officer Ethan Cole moved through it like he belonged to a different tempo. No rush, no swagger. Just measured steps and a calm that didn't ask permission. His uniform was crisp, his posture disciplined, his eyes doing the work before his mouth ever did. He didn't look around so much as he mapped. At his left, K9 Shadow walked in perfect alignment, leash slack, ears constantly adjusting to the soundscape. Shadow was a German shepherd with a controlled stillness that made people step aside without realizing they'd done it. His gaze wasn't aggressive. It was intelligent, present, assessing, quietly loyal. "Evening, Officer Cole," someone called, too cheerful. Ethan nodded once, polite but not performative. Captain Maria Hayes had assigned them to the fundraiser as visibility, the kind of shift that looked easy on paper. Wave at kids, reassure donors, keep things friendly. But Ethan knew crowds were ecosystems. When something went wrong, it didn't announce itself with a siren. It changed the rhythm. And tonight, the rhythm kept skipping. It was subtle. A hesitation when certain people passed, conversations that clipped short, eyes that slid away too quickly, a tension that didn't belong under string lights. Ethan's gaze drifted to the edge of the crowd near the dock offices, an older set of buildings with chipped paint and tinted windows. A few men stood there like they were part of the architecture, not enjoying the event, watching it. Shadow's ears angled that way, too. Ethan didn't pull the leash. He didn't need to. Shadow already knew Ethan had noticed. They made a slow pass towards the raffle table, where an elderly woman in a pale coat was carefully arranging stacks of envelopes beside a donation ledger. Her hands moved with the neat precision of someone who had made order out of chaos her whole life. She looked up and offered Ethan a gentle smile. "Officer," she said. Her voice carried the steadiness of age, soft but not weak. "Ma'am," Ethan replied, his tone respectful. He noted the way she stood, slight tremor at the fingers, but her spine straight. Her eyes were sharp. The volunteer badge pinned to her coat read Marjorie, Coordinator, in block letters. Shadow sat automatically at Ethan's side, calm as a statue. "Oh, hello there," Marjorie said to Shadow, a warmth in her face. "You're a handsome one." Shadow blinked slowly, the canine equivalent of a quiet acknowledgement. Ethan watched Marjorie's hands as she adjusted the envelopes. They weren't random, they were categorized, labeled, receipts, donation slips, something heavier than bake sale money. "You doing all right?" Ethan asked. Not small talk, a test. Marjorie's smile held, but her eyes flicked past him toward the dock offices. "I'm fine," she said, then added, almost too quickly, "busy." Ethan didn't push. He let the silence do its work. That's when the mood snapped. A man moved in from the dock side, walking like the world owed him clear space. Broad shoulders, heavy boots, jacket unzipped, even in the cold. He wasn't drunk. He was something worse, entitled and practiced. People saw him and made room, not politely, instinctively. Marjorie went still. Ethan's body didn't change position, but his attention sharpened into a blade. The man stopped at the table, leaning in close enough that his shadow swallowed the raffle baskets. "Well, well," he said, loud enough to carry. "Look at you, Mari, still playing bookkeeper." Marjorie's hands tightened around the envelope stack. "I'm volunteering," she said evenly. "Volunteering," he echoed, like the word tasted wrong. His eyes dropped to the envelopes. "That looks like a lot of paperwork for cupcakes and raffles." "Donors want transparency," Marjorie replied. A few feet away, a couple that had been smiling seconds ago stared at their shoes. The man's gaze slid to Ethan, then to Shadow. He gave a half laugh. "Police bringing the cavalry now?" Ethan didn't answer the bait. He kept his voice level. "Sir, keep it moving." The man's smile widened, the kind that never touched his eyes. "Oh, I'll keep it moving. I just wanted to say hi to Mari. She's been busy." His hand drifted toward the envelopes. Not fast, not obvious, like it was casual. Ethan saw it. Shadow saw it. Marjorie shifted to block her papers. The man's expression soured. "Don't get precious," he snapped. "Those records don't belong to you." "They belong to the fund," Marjorie said, calm but firm. Something in the man's face twitched, the smallest crack in his control. He reached again. Marjorie pulled back. The man's patience ended. His palm struck Marjorie's shoulder. Not a punch, not a swing, a shove, a move. But Marjorie was 70-something, slight, off balance from guarding the table. Her foot caught the leg of a folding chair. She went down hard. The sound wasn't dramatic. No movie crash, just the ugly final thud of a body meeting pavement. The crowd inhaled as one organism, and then froze. People stared. Nobody moved. That was the most chilling part. Not the shove. The silence afterward, the way fear held the entire fundraiser in place. Marjorie tried to push herself up. Her hands slipped. The man leaned down, quick, too quick, his fingers reaching for the envelopes that had slid toward the edge of the table. Ethan moved. He didn't sprint. He didn't shout. He crossed the distance with precise speed, stepping between the man and the table. Shadow flowed with him, controlled and silent, posture low but not lunging. A professional line. "Back up," Ethan said. The man straightened slowly, looking offended, as if Ethan had interrupted something private. "I didn't do anything," he said, loud enough for the crowd. "She fell." Ethan didn't look at the crowd. He looked at Marjorie. "Marjorie," he said, voice steady, "can you breathe?" Marjorie's face was pale, her jaw clenched against pain, but her eyes locked on the envelopes like they were life rafts. "Yes," she whispered. "My hip. It's—" Shadow stepped closer to her, not touching, but present. His body blocked space the way walls did. He stared at the man with calm certainty. Ethan crouched, one knee down, careful not to crowd her. "Stay still," he told her. "Help is coming." Then his gaze flicked to the table. Envelopes scattered. One thick one, sealed, had a strip of tape across it. Ethan looked back at the man. "You reached for those papers," Ethan said. Not a question. The man shrugged. "I was picking them up. I'm a good citizen." Ethan's expression didn't change. That was part of what made him dangerous. He didn't need anger. He needed clarity. "Sir," Ethan said, "step away from the table. Hands where I can see them." The man's eyes darted, toward the dock office shadows, toward the crowd, toward the exits. Calculating. Then he chuckled, stepping back one pace, just enough to look cooperative. "You cops," he muttered, always looking for drama. Ethan didn't rise. He stayed low beside Marjorie. He raised his voice slightly, not shouting, just cutting through the paralysis. "Call an ambulance," he said to the nearest person, a man holding a paper plate like it was armor. "Now." The man blinked, startled into motion. He fumbled for his phone. Ethan turned his head, scanning. That was when he caught Deputy Lucas Reed jogging through the crowd, face flushed with urgency. Lucas was young, energetic, trying to look composed and failing in the way rookies often did. But his eyes were sharp, and he was competent. He stopped beside Ethan, breathing hard. "Captain's on the way," Lucas said quickly. "What happened?" Ethan nodded toward the man. "He shoved her. He tried to take an envelope." Lucas's gaze snapped to the man, then to the dock offices. "Everyone's acting like he's untouchable," Lucas murmured. "Because someone trained them to," Ethan replied. Shadow's nose lifted. He sniffed once, then again, focused, his ears angled toward the thick sealed envelope. Ethan felt the subtle tension in Shadow's body shift, not aggression, interest. "Shadow," Ethan said softly. "Show me." Shadow moved to the table, nose hovering just above the sealed envelope. He inhaled, then paused, his head tilted slightly, alert. He looked back at Ethan. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" Lucas asked, voice low. "Something on that envelope," Ethan said. "Shadow's telling me it matters." Lucas swallowed. He glanced at the man again. The man was watching Shadow now, with a new edge to his expression. Not fear of the dog, fear of what the dog might find. Ethan stood smooth and controlled, and faced him. "What's your name?" Ethan asked. The man's jaw tightened. "Doesn't matter." "It matters if you put your hands on someone," Ethan said. "Name?" The man smiled without humor. "Ask around." Ethan held his gaze. "You don't want me asking around," Ethan said quietly, "because then I start hearing what you've done before." For a fraction of a second, the man's mask slipped. A flash of anger. Then he leaned in, voice low, for Ethan alone. "You don't know who you're messing with," he hissed. Ethan didn't flinch. "I'm not messing with anyone," Ethan replied. "I'm doing my job." The man's eyes flicked to Lucas. "And you," he sneered, "still playing junior hero? Cute." Lucas's cheeks reddened, but he held himself. Ethan stepped a half-pace closer, close enough that the man could feel the boundary. "Back up," Ethan said, tone unchanged. "One more step toward her or those papers, and you'll find out how fast this turns into cuffs." The man stared at him, then glanced again toward the dock offices, where one of the shadow men had shifted, like they were ready to intervene but didn't want to be seen doing it. The ambulance siren wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder. The man's smile returned, calculated. "This is a misunderstanding," he said, louder now for the crowd's benefit. "No harm done." Marjorie made a small sound, pain breaking through her composure. It wasn't loud, but it cut. Ethan's eyes stayed on the man. "Plenty of harm done," Ethan said, "and you're not leaving." The man's posture stiffened. "Watch me." He turned as if to walk away, bold, like the rules didn't apply to him. Ethan didn't chase. He simply spoke. "Lucas." Lucas understood. He moved to block the man's path, not touching, just placing his body where the exit used to be. The man stopped, irritation flaring. "You lay a hand on me," he warned, "and this town will—" Ethan interrupted without raising his voice. "This town doesn't get to decide what's legal," Ethan said. "The law does." The man looked past Ethan to the crowd, and that's when Ethan saw it, what the man was really counting on. Not strength, not weapons, compliance. The crowd's fear was his shield. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Not anger, resolve. He turned toward the nearest witnesses. "Someone saw what happened," Ethan said, loud enough for all of them. "I need one person to come forward and tell the truth." Silence. People's eyes slid away. Ethan felt the weight of it, how fear didn't just hurt victims, it recruited bystanders. Shadow sat beside Marjorie, ears forward, a silent guardian. Lucas looked like he wanted to scream at the crowd, but he didn't. He watched Ethan, learning. Ethan tried again, voice steady. "She's on the ground," Ethan said, "and the only reason he thinks he can do that is because no one speaks." A woman near the bake sale table trembled, lip quivering, but she didn't move. The man smirked. Ethan let the smirk sit in the air, then turned back to the envelope. "Secure that," Ethan told Lucas. "Gloves, evidence bag." Lucas blinked. "We have—" "From the cruiser," Ethan said. "Now." Lucas rushed off. Ethan knelt again by Marjorie, who was trying not to cry. "Did he know what was in the envelope?" Ethan asked quietly. Marjorie's eyes shone. She swallowed. "Yes," she whispered. Ethan's gaze sharpened. "What is it?" Marjorie hesitated, fear and determination wrestling inside her. Then she looked at Shadow, and something about the dog's steady presence gave her a fraction of courage. "Receipts," she said. "Transfer logs, things that shouldn't exist." Ethan nodded once. "And someone wants them gone." Marjorie's breath hitched. "They've been siphoning money," she whispered. "The relief fund, the port improvements. It's supposed to help families after the storm season. But I started seeing gaps, invoices that didn't match, vendors that don't exist." Ethan's face stayed calm, but inside, the picture was forming. A town fundraiser wasn't just cupcakes and raffles. It was a cash stream, and someone had built a system around it. The ambulance arrived, lights flashing against the water. Paramedics pushed through the crowd. People finally stepped aside, eager to look helpful now that professionals had arrived. Ethan stood, making room. The paramedics knelt beside Marjorie, asking questions. Lucas returned with gloves and a bag, breathless. He carefully sealed the envelope and any scattered papers. The man watched, jaw tight. That was confirmation enough. Captain Maria Hayes arrived moments later, her presence instantly shifting the crowd. She didn't need to shout. Authority lived in how she walked, pragmatic, composed, empathetic, without softness. She took in the scene in 2 seconds. Marjorie injured, Ethan steady, Lucas bagging evidence, the man too calm for an innocent person. "Ethan," Hayes said. "Targeted shove," Ethan replied. "Attempted theft, evidence linked to the relief fund." Hayes's gaze flicked to the man. "And him?" "Won't ID himself," Ethan said. "Crowd's afraid." Hayes nodded, understanding more than he said. Hayes stepped forward, stopping within a few feet of the man, close enough for him to feel watched, far enough to keep control. "Sir," Hayes said, "you're going to provide identification." The man lifted his chin. "Or what?" Hayes's voice stayed even. "Or you're going to be detained until we confirm your identity," she said. "And you're going to explain why you approached an elderly volunteer's financial records right after she was injured." For the first time the man looked unsettled, not panicked, but the casual dominance had cracks. He tried a laugh. "This is ridiculous." Hayes didn't move. "So is shoving a woman old enough to be your mother," she said. Shadow stood, not aggressive, just present. And in that moment, Ethan saw the crowd's fear wobble. Not gone, but challenged. One person, a teenage boy, maybe 16, raised his voice shakily. "He shoved her," the boy said. "I saw it." Another voice followed, older, a woman clutching a raffle ticket. "He did," she said quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "He tried to grab the papers, too." The dam didn't break all at once, but it started to leak. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest, not relief, something colder. Because once people finally speak, the people who thrive on silence start to get desperate, and desperation makes the next move uglier. Ethan watched the dock offices again. The shadow men were gone, not fleeing, repositioning. He looked at Hayes. "Captain," Ethan said, low, "this isn't over tonight." Hayes met his eyes. "I know," she said. Shadow's ears angled toward the water, toward the port corridors where machines hummed and secrets hid behind locked doors. And Ethan felt the shift. The fundraiser had stopped being a community event. It had become a crime scene with a heartbeat. The ambulance doors shut with a soft, final click, and the vehicle eased away from the curb in a slow, respectful departure. Lights still flashing, siren mercifully silent. The fundraiser tried to breathe again, but the air had changed. People spoke in half voices now, eyes darting as if the river itself might be listening. Ethan stood near the edge of the crowd, with Shadow at heel, watching the way the man, still refusing to identify himself, kept his shoulders squared like he was the one being inconvenienced. Captain Maria Hayes had him positioned away from the tables, away from the volunteer station, away from the immediate audience. Not because she wanted to protect him, because she wanted to control the blast radius. "Last chance," Hayes said, holding out her hand. "ID." The man's eyes slid over her, dismissive in the way men are when they assume the badge belongs to someone they can outlast. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Captain, right? That what you are? You got a lot of confidence for someone who works in a town that keeps its lights on because the docks keep moving." Hayes didn't react. She'd heard every version of that line, power disguised as practicality. "You're either going to identify yourself," she said, "or you're going to sit in a holding room while we do it for you." He smiled. "Detain me at a fundraiser in front of everyone? Real good for community relations." "You shoved an elderly woman," Hayes said flatly. "Community relations already took a hit. Yours." The man's smile thinned, and for the first time the calculation behind his eyes came into focus. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, as if performing cooperation. Ethan's stance shifted by a fraction. Shadow's head tilted, ears forward. The man produced a wallet and flipped it open with unnecessary flourish. "Name's Brett Madsen," he said, like the name should mean something. "Port Operations Liaison." Hayes took the card, looked at it once, then passed it to Lucas. "Run it." Lucas nodded and moved quickly, phone already out. Madsen's eyes flicked to Ethan. "And you," Madsen said, "and a casual cruelty in his tone. K-9 guy, thought you'd be more busy, like chasing drunks and lost kids. Ethan met his gaze without blinking. I'm busy, Ethan said, right now. Brett Madsen's mouth tightened. He leaned in again, voice lower. You know what your problem is, officer? You think truth is a weapon? In this town, truth is a liability. Ethan didn't answer the bait. He looked past Madsen toward the dock offices. The men were still gone. That was the part that mattered. Hayes read Ethan's glance and followed it. She didn't ask questions in public. She nodded once, small, precise. Ethan, she said quietly, walk with me. They moved a few steps away, just far enough that the fundraiser's chatter blurred into background noise. What are you seeing? Hayes asked. Ethan didn't look at her when he answered. He watched the perimeter, the entrances, the way people stood too still when they thought they were being watched. They weren't expecting uniforms tonight, Ethan said. But they were watching anyway. This shove wasn't a temper tantrum. It was an attempted snatch and burn. Hayes's jaw tightened. The envelope, she said. Shadow alerted, Ethan replied. Chemical trace, industrial solvent, or adhesive, something tied to port infrastructure. Hayes's eyes narrowed. So the paperwork points to the port, and the port is trying to erase it. Yes, Ethan said, and when an intimidation network realizes evidence is moving, it doesn't stop. It escalates. Hayes exhaled slowly. We need to secure her home, family, anyone who's touched those records. Ethan's gaze flicked back to the ambulance's departing taillights. She's the coordinator, he said. She knows more than she's saying, and now she's hurt. Hayes nodded once, decisive. Lucas, Hayes called. Lucas jogged up, phone in hand. ID checks out. Port liaison, municipal contract employee. No warrants. Couple old complaints. Harassment. Never stuck. Hayes's expression didn't change. Of course. Lucas lowered his voice. What do we do? He's acting like he owns the river. Hayes looked at Ethan. Ethan understood. The law could hold him for the shove, but the bigger danger wasn't Madsen. It was what he represented. You're not under arrest right now, Hayes told Madsen loud enough for nearby witnesses to hear. But you are being documented, and this incident is being reported. If we see you near that volunteer's property or any fundraiser materials again, you'll be detained immediately. Madsen's grin returned, smug. You do what you gotta do, he said. He turned and walked away with the unhurried arrogance of someone who expected no consequences. Ethan watched him go, and Shadow's gaze tracked him too, unwavering. The fundraiser tried to restart. Someone turned the music up, too loud, as if volume could drown out fear. Parents drew their children closer. People avoided looking at the dock offices. Ethan didn't stay for the closing announcements. He followed Hayes and Lucas back to the cruiser, where the night became quieter and more honest. As soon as the doors shut, Hayes leaned forward between the seats. I want Dr. Moore on this, she said. Ethan nodded. Envelope, tape, residue, anything she can tell us about handling. Hayes looked at Lucas. You pulled security? Lucas grimaced. I tried. The camera facing the raffle table conveniently dropped connection 10 minutes before the shove. Other angles are fine. Hayes's eyes hardened. That's not a glitch, she said. No, Ethan agreed. That's control. Shadow shifted in the back seat, harness straps catching the dashboard glow. He made a quiet sound, almost a sigh, but his posture stayed alert. Ethan drove them toward the precinct. Not fast, not slow. Measured. On the way, Hayes's phone buzzed twice. She ignored the first, answered the second. Her expression shifted in a way Ethan recognized. Someone had just confirmed a pattern. She hung up and looked at Ethan. That volunteer, Hayes said. Marjorie Caldwell. Ethan's eyes stayed on the road. Go on. She's been quietly asking questions for months, Hayes said. Paper trails, vendor lists, relief fund allocations, town council meetings. Lucas whistled softly. That's brave. Hayes didn't smile. That's dangerous. Ethan's jaw tightened. Where does she live? He asked. Hayes told him an address. Small house near the river, modest neighborhood, the kind of place where porch lights stayed on because people still believed in decency. Ethan nodded once. We go now, he said. Hayes didn't hesitate. Yes. They rerouted. Marjorie Street was quieter than it should have been. Not peaceful, quiet. quiet like a held breath. Ethan parked a house down and killed the engine. "Shadow," Ethan murmured. Shadow's ears flicked. He waited. Ethan opened the back door and let Shadow out first. The dog moved into the night like a shadow should, silent, controlled, sensing. Hayes and Lucas followed Ethan up the walkway. Porch light was on, curtains drawn. Ethan knocked once. Firm, no answer. He knocked again. "Mrs. Caldwell, it's Officer Cole." Nothing. Lucas shifted nervously. "Maybe she's still at the hospital." "Maybe," Ethan said, but his instincts didn't settle. Shadow's nose traced the edge of the porch. He paused at the door, sniffed the seam. Then his posture changed. Tight, alert, Ethan felt it before Shadow even looked up. "Something's off," Lucas whispered. Ethan's gaze swept the frame. No visible damage, no broken window, but the lock mechanism had faint scratches. Recent, careful, not a kick-in. "A pick?" Hayes saw it too. Her voice stayed low. "We need to check welfare," she said, "if forced entry suspected." Ethan nodded once. He drew his flashlight, angled it low to avoid broadcasting their approach. "Shadow," Ethan whispered, "stay close." Shadow pressed near Ethan's leg, a calm weight of readiness. Hayes stepped back to give Ethan room. Ethan tested the doorknob. It turned, unlocked. Ethan's pulse didn't spike. It narrowed like a lens. He pushed the door open, slowly. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and old books until it didn't. There was another scent underneath, metallic, stale sweat, and something chemical, faint. Shadow's nose lifted, his ears angled forward. He didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply stepped in and stopped. That stop meant everything. Ethan swept the entryway with his light. Living room, neat, no obvious struggle. A framed photo of Marjorie with 2 grandchildren on the mantel. Knitted blanket folded precisely on the couch. Too neat. Ethan moved deeper, Hayes behind him, Lucas covering the rear. The kitchen was spotless, sink empty. But the table had a single chair pulled out, angled awkwardly, like someone had stood up fast. Ethan's light caught a glint on the floor near the chair leg, a small strip of clear tape. Fresh. Shadow sniffed it and looked up at Ethan. Chemical again. Ethan's gut tightened. They moved down the hall toward the bedroom. Ethan's light fell on a closet door slightly ajar. Then a soft sound, not from inside the closet, from the back of the house. Ethan held up a hand. "Freeze." They listened. A low shuffle, a muffled breath. Ethan turned toward the laundry room door. Shadow's body lowered. Ethan eased it open. And there she was. Marjorie Caldwell sat on the floor behind stacked detergent boxes, knees pulled to her chest, eyes wide with terror. Her cheek had a fresh bruise. Her hands shook. She pressed a finger to her lips, begging for silence. Ethan crouched, lowering his presence. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe. You're safe now." Marjorie's breath hitched. Tears gathered, but she didn't cry loudly. She didn't want to make noise. That alone told Ethan how close fear had been. Hayes knelt beside Ethan, her expression softening. "Mrs. Caldwell," Hayes said gently, "did someone come here?" Marjorie nodded, swallowing hard. "They said," she whispered, "they said they were from the town office." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "When?" "Right after the fundraiser," she said. "They said the receipts needed to be secured." Hayes's voice turned colder. "How many?" Marjorie hesitated. "2?" Lucas muttered under his breath. "Of course." Ethan kept his tone steady. "Did they take anything?" he asked. Marjorie's eyes flicked to the living room. "They tried," she whispered. "They wanted the envelope, but I didn't bring it home." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "Where is it?" Marjorie's throat worked, fear and determination wrestling. "In a lockbox," she said. "Not here." Hayes exhaled slowly, relieved and alarmed at once. Ethan leaned in slightly, voice calm but precise. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, "look at me. This matters. Where is the lockbox?" Marjorie hesitated again. Then, quietly, "At the port," she whispered. "I used to work there years ago. I still have access to an old maintenance corridor. I hid it there because I knew if I kept it here, they'd come." Hayes's eyes widened. "You hid evidence at the port?" Marjorie flinched. "I didn't know who to trust," she whispered. "Every time I asked questions, someone would advise me to stop." Ethan didn't judge. He understood. Towns like this didn't need handcuffs to keep people obedient. They used pressure, isolation, quiet consequences. Ethan looked at Hayes. "The port," he said. Hayes nodded, but Lucas spoke first, nervous energy bubbling. "Wait, if they know it's at the port and they already tried to grab her at the fundraiser, why didn't they go straight there?" Ethan's eyes stayed on Marjorie. "Because they didn't know for sure," Ethan said. "They were searching. Tonight confirmed the paper exists. The chemical suggests tampering. Now they'll move." Hayes's voice was firm. "We relocate you," she told Marjorie. "Now, somewhere safe." Marjorie's eyes flicked to her house, the life she'd built. "I don't want to leave," she whispered. "I know," Hayes said, empathetic but uncompromising. "But they already crossed your threshold. That means they're not stopping." Shadow stepped closer and gently nudged Marjorie's hand with his nose, just a small touch. Grounding. Marjorie's breath shuddered. She nodded. Ethan stood, posture shifting from protection to operation. "Captain," he said, "we need to secure the lockbox before they destroy it." Hayes met his eyes. "Agreed." Lucas swallowed. "Tonight?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "Tonight," he said, "because if we wait, the evidence disappears." Hayes straightened. "Lucas, you'll drive Mrs. Caldwell to the precinct. Keep her inside. No windows, no stops." Lucas nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." Hayes looked at Ethan. "And you?" she asked. Ethan's gaze went toward the river, where port lights blinked like distant warnings. "I'm going to the port," Ethan said. Hayes held his gaze. "Not alone," she said. Ethan didn't argue. He respected Hayes because she didn't confuse caution with fear. Hayes turned to Marjorie. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said gently, "we're going to stop them. But we need your help one more time." Marjorie's voice trembled. "What do you need?" Hayes's eyes were steady. "Tell us exactly where the corridor is," she said, "and what the lockbox looks like." Marjorie nodded, swallowing hard. "It's behind Bay 3, she whispered. "Old maintenance passage. There's a door marked electrical that doesn't lead to electrical anymore. The lockbox is inside a wall panel. Black. Combination lock." Ethan absorbed every detail, filing it like coordinates. Hayes nodded once. "Good," she said. "We do this clean. We do it by protocol." As they walked back to the cruiser, Ethan's phone buzzed. An unknown number. He didn't answer. He watched the screen until it stopped. Then it buzzed again and again. Hayes glanced at him. "You expecting trouble?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "No," he said, "but trouble is expecting me." Shadow's ears flicked as if he agreed. They drove toward the port, and the riverfront lights grew harsher, colder, industrial, less like a community and more like a machine that didn't like being watched. The port at night was a different animal than the riverfront fundraiser. Down by the water, string lights and music made people forget the river could swallow things without leaving a trace. But here, past the last storefronts, past the cheerful banners and civic pride, the shoreline turned industrial. Sodium lights cast everything in a sickly amber. Chain-link fences stitched the perimeter shut. The air smelled like wet rope, diesel, rust, and cold metal that never warmed no matter how long the day tried. Ethan parked 2 blocks out where the cruiser wouldn't announce itself. Hayes sat beside him, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was controlled, clipped. Not fear, not urgency. Precision. "Dr. Moore," she said, "I need you up and dressed. We have potential evidence tampering and a threatened witness. I'm not asking tomorrow." A pause. Hayes listened, eyes forward. "Yes," she said. "Tonight, port corridor. Chemical trace on tape and envelope." Another pause. "Bring your kit," Hayes finished. "Meet us at the south gate. 10 minutes." She ended the call and looked at Ethan. "She's on her way," Hayes said. Ethan nodded once. He didn't ask how she convinced Lena. Hayes didn't convince people by pushing. She did it by making the truth unavoidable. Ethan didn't waste words. "Show me," Lena said. Ethan produced the strip of clear tape they'd found on Marjorie's kitchen floor, sealed in a small bag Lucas had handed off before leaving. Lena examined it under her light. She didn't make a big show of it. She simply became quiet. Then she spoke. "This isn't household tape," she said. Hayes's eyes narrowed. "Meaning?" Lena angled the tape, catching the shimmer of adhesive. Industrial grade. The adhesive formulation is different, more aggressive tack, more resistant to moisture, used for sealing shipping manifests, not gift wrap. Ethan's jaw tightened. Port supply. Likely, Lena said, and she held the bag closer, studying a faint smudge pattern on the edge. This handling mark, that's not bare skin. Hayes leaned in slightly. Gloves. Lena nodded once. Nitrile, most likely. Smooth pressure, no micro-ridge transfer. Whoever touched this didn't want prints, and they knew what they were doing. Ethan felt the pieces lock into place. The shove at the fundraiser wasn't spontaneous. The missing footage wasn't coincidence. The lockbox location wasn't just a good hiding place. It was inside an ecosystem they controlled. Hayes straightened. "We're going in." Lena looked from Hayes to Ethan. "Legally, you need probable cause for a search." Ethan didn't flinch. "We have an assaulted victim, attempted theft of financial records, and evidence of tampering tied to this facility. We're not sweeping the port. We're retrieving a specific lockbox described by the victim." Lena's eyes held his for a beat. Then she nodded. Specific is good. Ethan didn't waste words. "Show me," Lena said. Ethan produced the strip of clear tape they'd found on Marjorie's kitchen floor, sealed in a small bag Lucas had handed off before leaving. Lena examined it under her light. She didn't make a big show of it. She simply became quiet. Then she spoke. "This isn't household tape," she said. Hayes's eyes narrowed. "Meaning?" Lena angled the tape, catching the shimmer of adhesive. "Industrial grade. The adhesive formulation is different, more aggressive tack, more resistant to moisture, used for sealing shipping manifests, not gift wrap." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Port supply." "Likely," Lena said, and she held the bag closer, studying a faint smudge pattern on the edge. "This handling mark, that's not bare skin." Hayes leaned in slightly. "Gloves." Lena nodded once. "Nitrile, most likely. Smooth pressure, no micro-ridge transfer. Whoever touched this didn't want prints, and they knew what they were doing." Ethan felt the pieces lock into place. The shove at the fundraiser wasn't spontaneous. The missing footage wasn't coincidence. The lockbox location wasn't just a good hiding place. It was inside an ecosystem they controlled. Hayes straightened. "We're going in." Lena looked from Hayes to Ethan. "Legally, you need probable cause for a search." Ethan didn't flinch. "We have an assaulted victim, attempted theft of financial records, and evidence of tampering tied to this facility. We're not sweeping the port. We're retrieving a specific lockbox described by the victim." Lena's eyes held his for a beat, then she nodded. "Specific is good." Hayes looked toward the gate. "How do we open it?" Ethan's gaze went to Shadow. He didn't need the dog for a lock, but he did need him for what came after. Ethan pulled out a small key ring from his belt, municipal access keys. He'd been assigned to the riverfront patrol long enough to have legitimate entry privileges for emergency response. He slid the key into the padlock. It turned too easily. Ethan paused. That wasn't comforting. That was staged. He opened the gate and they slipped inside, the fence swallowing them behind chain link and shadow. The port yard spread wide, containers stacked like blunt cliffs, long corridors of concrete between them. The soundscape was minimal. Distant hum of generators, water lapping against pilings, the occasional metallic ping as something shifted in the wind. Shadow's paws made no sound. Ethan didn't like that. Silence was rarely natural in places like this. They moved toward Bay 3, following Marjorie's directions. Lena stayed close, her case held tight. She wasn't tactical, but she wasn't fragile either. She moved with focus, eyes flicking where Ethan's did. Hayes hung slightly behind Ethan, hand near her radio, not calling for units yet. Too early. Too loud. They were here for clean retrieval, not a parade. At the back of Bay 3, the electrical door sat recessed into the concrete like it had been forgotten. The paint was chipped, the sign was faded. Ethan aimed his flashlight low. The lock was new, not consistent with the door. Someone had secured it recently. Hayes's expression tightened. They're sealing it off. Ethan didn't touch the knob yet. He looked at Shadow. "Show me," Ethan murmured. Shadow moved forward, nose hovering at the base of the door, then along the frame. He inhaled, slow, deliberate. His ears angled toward the corridor beyond the door as if he could hear things that weren't sound. Then Shadow paused at the handle and stiffened. Ethan felt it immediately, the silent message in Shadow's body. Someone had been here recently. Maybe someone still was. Ethan whispered, "Hold." Shadow froze, posture low, ready. Hayes leaned closer, voice barely audible. "You think we're walking into a trap?" Ethan's eyes stayed on the door. "I think they want us to hesitate." Lena's voice was quiet but firm. "If you don't go in, they buy time to remove the box." Hayes nodded once. "Then we go in, tight." Ethan drew his body slightly sideways to minimize silhouette. He turned the knob slowly. It opened. No creak, no resistance. Again, too easy. They stepped through. The corridor smelled like dust and old electrical insulation, but beneath it was the same faint chemical note Lena had detected on the tape. Industrial adhesive, solvent, something used to seal, conceal, erase. The passage was narrow, lit only by Ethan's flashlight beam. Pipes ran along the ceiling like veins. Old conduit boxes lined the walls. Shadow moved first, body low, head angled forward, nostrils working. He wasn't searching for a person's smell yet. He was tracking the chemical signature. Ethan kept his breathing steady. He didn't let adrenaline take the wheel. That was the point of his archetype. Calm was not an emotion. It was a weapon. They advanced deeper until Shadow stopped at a wall panel, metal, square, slightly misaligned like it had been removed and replaced. Shadow's nose touched the edge, then lifted. He looked back at Ethan. There. Ethan crouched and examined the panel. Fresh scuff marks near the screws. Lena stepped in, shining her light close. "Recent tool contact," she murmured. "These scratches are clean." Hayes's jaw tightened. "They've been in here." Ethan placed his fingers near the screw, not removing yet. He listened. A faint sound, soft but unmistakable. Footsteps. Not close, but approaching. From behind them. Ethan's pulse didn't spike. It narrowed. He lifted a hand. Freeze. Hayes went still. Lena held her breath. Shadow's ears snapped back, listening behind. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a voice, casual, too casual, floated down the corridor. "Y'all lost?" Ethan didn't move yet. He kept his flashlight angled low. A figure stepped into the edge of the beam, male, bulky, wearing a reflective port jacket. His face was half-shadowed, but his posture was relaxed in a way that meant he wanted them to feel out of place. Behind him, another figure lingered, mostly hidden, and just beyond them, barely visible, was Brett Madsen, the port liaison from the fundraiser. His grin was smaller now, tighter. Ethan stood slowly, keeping his hands visible, posture controlled. "Port maintenance?" Ethan asked, voice calm. The first man shrugged. "Something like that." Madsen stepped forward, stopping just outside Shadow's reach. He glanced at the dog, then at Ethan. "Officer Cole," Madsen said, like they were old friends. "Funny running into you." Hayes's voice cut in, clear and official. "Mr. Madsen, what are you doing here?" Madsen spread his hands. "Working, like I told you. Port operations." Ethan watched his eyes. Madsen wasn't here to work. He was here to control. Ethan's tone remained flat. "We're conducting a welfare-related evidence retrieval. Step aside." Madsen's smile sharpened. "Evidence retrieval? That's cute. You got a warrant for this little field trip?" Hayes stepped half a pace forward. "We have probable cause tied to an assault and attempted theft, and we are not discussing details with you." Madsen's gaze flicked to Lena. "Who's the lady?" Lena didn't react. She was quiet, but her eyes were razor-sharp. "Forensic consultant," Hayes said. Madsen made a mock-sympathetic face. "You really want to bring civilians into port corridors at night?" "Sounds risky." Ethan didn't bite. He lifted his body camera slightly, letting the indicator light be seen. "It's being recorded," Ethan said. "Everything you say, everything you do." Madsen's grin faltered for a fraction of a second. Then he recovered, chuckling. "Oh, I'm not worried," he said. "We don't do anything wrong here." Ethan's gaze stayed steady. "Then step aside," Ethan said. Madsen didn't. Instead, he nodded once, almost kindly, like he was explaining something to a child. "You don't understand," Madsen said softly. "This place? It's not like the fundraiser. This is infrastructure, contracts, jobs. You start poking around and people get hurt, not because we want it, because that's how it works." Hayes's eyes hardened. "That is a threat." Madsen lifted his hands again. "No, Captain, it's reality." Shadow didn't growl. He didn't lunge. He simply shifted his weight, placing his body slightly forward, a quiet barrier. It was the K9 anchor rule made flesh: silent communication, tactical synergy, emotional grounding. Madsen noticed. His breath caught just a little. Ethan's voice remained level, but there was steel inside it. "Move," Ethan said. Madsen's smile died. He glanced to the man in the reflective jacket. The man's hand drifted toward his pocket, not fast. Lena's breath hitched. Hayes's fingers hovered near her radio. Ethan didn't draw his weapon. He didn't need to. Not yet. He simply shifted his stance, subtle, grounded, making his body a statement. "I'm not leaving." And then he spoke, calm as a locked door. "You don't want to do this," Ethan said. "Not here, not on record." Madsen's eyes narrowed. "You think a camera saves you?" Ethan didn't blink. "I think it saves the truth." The corridor held its breath. Madsen took a step closer, testing Shadow's boundary. Shadow's posture lowered, muscles coiling, not to attack, but to warn. A low sound rolled from his chest. Not a bark. A controlled growl, the professional warning of a trained asset. One more step, and the rules change. Madsen stopped. Ethan's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Back up," Ethan said. Madsen's jaw clenched. His eyes flicked to Hayes's radio again, calculating. He realized something then. This wasn't a town crowd that would freeze. This was a team that would hold the line. Hayes spoke into her radio, voice crisp. "Unit to Captain Hayes. Start rolling to Bay 3. No lights, no sirens." Quiet approach. Madsen's eyes widened slightly. He tried to hide it with a scoff. "You calling friends?" he sneered. Hayes's expression was cold. "I'm calling accountability." Ethan didn't look away from Madsen. "You can step aside," Ethan said, "or you can be part of the obstruction report." The man in the reflective jacket suddenly moved, fast, lunging not at Ethan, but toward the wall panel behind him, toward the evidence. Ethan reacted instantly, not by tackling, not by escalating into chaos, by blocking. He pivoted, putting his body between the man and the panel. "Stop!" Ethan commanded. Shadow surged forward in perfect synchronization, teeth bared but still controlled, cutting off the corridor like a living gate. The man froze mid-step, hands raised. Madsen's voice snapped, angry now. "Get out of the way!" Ethan's eyes were ice. "No," he said. And then the backup arrived. Boots on concrete, radios whispering, presence filling the corridor from behind Ethan like a tide of lawful force. Captain Hayes' timing was perfect, enough to stabilize, not inflame. Madsen looked over Ethan's shoulder and saw it, saw the numbers, saw the cameras, saw the certainty. For the first time, his untouchable aura cracked. Ethan didn't let him run. He held the line, calm and immovable, while the corridor filled with consequences. The corridor filled without chaos. That was the thing Ethan noticed first. The absence of panic. No shouting, no rushing boots. Just controlled movement and quiet authority as Captain Hayes' units flowed in and sealed the space with practiced precision. Brett Madsen looked from face to face, his confidence bleeding away in thin rivulets. The men who had stood with him moments ago shifted their weight, recalculating. They were not criminals hardened for last stands. They were enforcers who thrived in ambiguity. And ambiguity had just died. "Hands where I can see them," Hayes ordered. This time Madsen didn't smirk. He raised his hands slowly, palms out, anger simmering just beneath his skin. "This is overreach," he snapped. "You can't just storm port facilities." "We didn't storm," Hayes replied coolly. "We entered lawfully, documented obstruction, and prevented destruction of evidence." She nodded to Ethan. "Retrieve it." Ethan turned back to the wall panel. His movements were steady, deliberate, no rush, no drama. He removed the screws one by one, the faint metallic clicks echoing down the corridor like punctuation marks. Shadow stayed planted at his side, body angled outward, eyes never leaving Madsen. The panel came free. Behind it sat a matte black lockbox, compact but heavy, recessed neatly into the wall. No dust, recently handled. Ethan lifted it out carefully. "Combination?" Hayes asked. Ethan shook his head. Marjorie gave it to Lucas. Hayes spoke into her radio. "Lucas, confirm." A beat. Then Lucas's voice came through, tight but clear. "Confirmed. Combination sent. Secure channel." Ethan entered the numbers slowly. The lock clicked. Inside the box were sealed folders, USB drives, and a ledger bound with a rubber strap. Old school, physical, harder to erase. Lena stepped in, eyes sharp. "Don't touch anything else," she said. "Let me document." She photographed, swabbed, sealed, every movement precise, almost reverent. This was her language, truth preserved through process. Madsen's jaw clenched. "You have no idea what you're doing," he spat. "You pull that thread, the whole port collapses." Ethan closed the lockbox gently and turned. His voice was calm, final. "No," he said. "What collapses is the lie holding it together." Hayes stepped forward. "Brett Madsen," she said, "you're being detained for obstruction of justice and attempted destruction of evidence." Madsen's shoulders sagged just a fraction. Not defeat, fear. As he was cuffed, he locked eyes with Ethan, resentment, disbelief, something like grudging respect flickering behind it. "This isn't over," Madsen muttered. Ethan met his gaze evenly. "It is for you," he replied. The ripple spread faster than anyone in that corridor expected. By dawn, external investigators had arrived, quietly, efficiently. No sirens, no spectacle. Just federal credentials and sealed warrants. The port offices were locked down, files cloned, accounts frozen. By noon, the town knew, not through rumor, through confirmation. Names surfaced, contracts unraveled. The relief fund ledger told a story that could no longer be denied. Money rerouted, projects inflated, silence purchased. And people started talking. At the precinct, Marjorie Caldwell sat wrapped in a blanket, hands steady now. Ethan stood across from her, shadow lying at his feet like a promise kept. "They won't hurt anyone else," Ethan said. Marjorie looked at him, eyes shining with something stronger than gratitude. "They already don't," she replied, "because you didn't look away." Hayes watched from the doorway, arms crossed, expression proud but restrained. This wasn't about celebration, it was about repair. The riverfront changed, not overnight, not magically. But fear loosened its grip. The dock offices reopened under audit. The fundraiser rescheduled, not as an apology, but as a statement. Attendance doubled. People stood closer together. They spoke louder. Deputy Lucas Reed found himself answering questions from residents who suddenly believed the law might actually listen. He handled it with earnest seriousness, and the occasional nervous joke that made people smile. Dr. Lena Moore returned to her lab, already drafting reports that would echo far beyond the town's limits. She didn't seek credit. She never did. Captain Maria Hayes testified twice that week, calm and unshakable, laying out the case like a blueprint for accountability. And Ethan. Ethan returned to patrol. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the river copper, he walked the same stretch of waterfront where the fundraiser had nearly shattered into silence. Marjorie was there, standing straighter now, volunteer badge pinned proudly to her coat. "You didn't just protect evidence," she said softly as Ethan approached. "You protected people like me." Ethan shook his head gently. "You protected yourself," he said. "I just made sure you weren't alone." Shadow sat beside him, tail thumping once against the pavement. A child nearby pointed. "That's the dog," the child whispered, "the one who stopped the bad guys." Shadow glanced over, ears flicking, then leaned gently into Ethan's leg. Not a hero's pose, a guardian's. As night settled over the riverfront, honest now, quieter but unafraid, Ethan felt the calm return. Not the calm of ignorance, the calm that comes after truth stands its ground. And for the first time in a long while, the town slept without holding its breath.